you know.
Coming your way. Sent.
I think I got it just now.
Cool.
Or nope, my phone vibrated for something else. No, it was that.
There you go.
It just didn't refresh on the computer. Yeah. I hear my audio on the stream, so we're going over, just so you know.
Ah, yeah. We're okay. We're not saying anything bad yet. You know what? I'll just start it off. Ready to rip? Let's do it. Take this Band-Aid off. Welcome back to another Angry Streams, weirdos. Today I have a fantastic special guest that I've been very excited, that I've been thinking about having on for, geez, a while now. But one of his recent stories really piqued my interest, and that was about the Innocence Project. And our guest today is Sean from Actual Justice Warrior. Everybody say hello to Sean. Yay.
Hi. Thank you for having me on, and for that rousing round of applause.
It's not so bad.
No, I appreciate it. So, I mean, yeah. So, I like talking about the Innocence Project from time to time. And if I would have known you wanted to have me on, I would have come on earlier.
Well, it took me a little bit of time to grow some balls and then ask you. But now here we are. And I know we were talking a little bit before we even started this thing up about the Innocence Project, and I cut myself off because I didn't want to get too far into it before we started the stream. So allow me to kind of give you my understanding of the Innocence Project and then what brought my interest to it and why we're here today, to kind of teach me a little bit more about something that I was interested in because of you. So what was it, about like 2 months ago, Joe Rogan, correct me if I'm wrong, when did Joe Rogan have the Innocence Project on with the individual that ended up just going full tilt?
I believe he had him on in February of this year, and then in March of this year is where, you know, he may have killed somebody because of the overwhelming evidence that he did.
Yes.
But it's still led.
Because of that's a very good way to put it, because of the overwhelming evidence that he did.
Yeah.
So I see this. You broke it down, and I had heard of the Innocence Project before, and for my very basic understanding what the Innocence Project was, it was seemingly a really good idea. Hey, there's people that are in jail, and they've been, you know, they may have been guilty, or maybe they weren't guilty at all, and there's new evidence that can exculpate them from their charges. Or maybe, hey, you know what, this was like a weed charge back in 2001. Marijuana's legal now in New York. Let's get this guy out of jail for 20 years that he was supposed to serve over just a marijuana charge. So these ideals that the Innocence Project kind of puts forward as their coat of arms. Hey, here's who we are. This is what we do. We get people out of jail that shouldn't be there, and we try to get people out of jail that have ridiculous sentencing that is
well,
medieval.
To be fair, the Innocence Project isn't really marijuana, or like you were convicted and served too much time for that crime. Like, I'm sure they're still in favor of that, but it's primarily, in my opinion, an anti-death penalty organization.
Okay.
By any means necessary, but they also like kind of stack up their numbers by doing a lot of DNA testing on cases, which by the way, for the people who are legitimately innocent is a good thing.
Mhm.
So, if it's a basic case where it's a sexual assault and, it's back in 1972 when they couldn't do the DNA testing for the semen, they'll retest that, find out that it was some other guy, and like those are the people that I believe are actually innocent that the Innocence Project will free. But they're also just like fully an anti-death penalty organization, and they're willing to use media manipulation and any kind of tactic to advocate for their client, get them out of prison, because their goal is to undermine the criminal justice system. And this kind of goes to their original founder, which one of them is called Barry Schneck. He's on the OJ Simpson dream team, who recently passed away, looking up on us from where he is right now. And when you realize that the founder of the Innocence Project is somebody who masterminded the defense of O.J. Simpson, you understand that it's not really about innocence.
It's
And
a little bittersweet.
He even said O.J. inspired him to do this. So, like, I mean, come on.
Yeah. So thank you for that. I didn't know that they were just primarily anti-death penalty. But to kind of go with what I was saying is my limited understanding was here they are. We're here to assist people that have been treated less than in the criminal justice system. But then different side of the same coin, they also had this massive, I would say, political swing, political muscle that they try to use in order to undermine the criminal justice system as we see now. And you brought that to light, specifically for me, when you brought up, what was the gentleman's name? I use gentleman loosely.
Sheldon Johnson, is that the recent one?
Sheldon Johnson. That was the one that was on the Rogan podcast. So when I started watching your episode and breakdowns and other people's breakdowns, and then the episode in of itself, the clip specifically where he's talking about things, I started to look and see the manipulation in there, and I was like, oh, is this project just a cover up for undermining everything that good cops have been doing their entire careers and putting bad guys behind bars? Or are they trying to actually assist the innocents that have been wrongfully convicted, or preventing the death penalty for whoever, hey, that's a noble cause. You don't want to kill anybody. I can understand that. I might disagree with you and say that some people have chosen to give up that life because of a life of crime. But I can understand and I can respect you if you say that life is precious and we don't want to kill anybody, or state-sanctioned murder is bad. I can
Right.
see your point of view. So I started looking into this.
I'm partial to the argument that, hey, you know what, we make mistakes in if you make a mistake in a death penalty case, an innocent person can be killed. I'm completely partial to that argument. But the thing is like they'll take up cases where they're dead on for sure 100% guilty.
Mhm.
Like it's absurd the level of guilt that these people will have. And then they'll just propagandize. They'll introduce information that was not suitable as evidence in court for a reason, and then they never give the other side of the story. And a lot of times they'll even go into these elaborate smear campaigns to the victims' family members, to the victims themselves. They've often like tried to frame individuals, like, at least in the court of public opinion, because like they actually can't be charged with the crime, which is one of the reasons why they're pinning the crime on them.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of shady tactics, not to mention the fact that when you open up with a modern lens, these like 1990s cases or 1980s cases, and everything was on paperwork, and you're trying to like relitigate what this crossed out word means 40 years later, like, yeah, you can seemingly, again with no opposition, poke holes in any single case. But one of the things you realize with a bunch of these cases, and by the way, Rogan has had a bunch of these guys that are actually claiming to be innocent that are 100% guilty on his show before, and like you examine it and you're like, oh well, I at least it's going to be close when I look into it. It's
That's-
going to be like a 50-50. It's not even close, a bunch of these cases.
That's what kind of piqued my interest with it when you were talking about it. You're like, oh, hey, here's this one person, right, that was most recently on in February, like you said, that potentially, with overwhelming evidence that you stated, dismembered a person in a New York City apartment, dismembered them, killed them, dismembered them, and then moved them out in suitcases one at a time to try and discard the body. And then
As he begged for mercy, he shot him point blank.
That's
It
right,
was
you
a
said
prison beef.
neighbors' statement stated that they could hear their neighbor begging for their life.
Right. And by the way, I'm saying like allegedly because he's technically not convicted. Let's be honest. He shows up to the apartment building. He's caught on surveillance going into the apartment. The person that he went in with is no longer alive. His body parts are in the apartment in a bin that he is also seen on surveillance video bringing in. And they're also in Sheldon Johnson's apartment. So they're both in there. And comedically, because you always got to add a humor, he tried wearing disguises when he was
Yes.
coming in and out of the building, including a blonde wig, which I mean, come on.
It did not fit. He's not a Summer. He's more of a winner. He should have went with a black wig. I think just a fashion faux pas set this guy back possibly a lifetime.
You know it doesn't draw attention to you? Like, in that neighborhood, like a 50-plus-year-old African American man won't draw that much attention.
No.
A 50-plus-year-old African American man with a blonde wig, bleach blonde,
Yes.
is gonna draw some attention. Like, it's gonna catch the eye. So
Who's
maybe
the
not the best
6'4"
guy.
trans neighbor that just showed up? Yeah. I can see that setting off some red flags.
Now, to be fair to the Innocence Project guys, they didn't say Sheldon Johnson was innocent. They did diminish his crimes extremely, as I
Yes.
found out. Like he was convicted. First of all, he was downplaying his crimes, which was to an absurd degree.
Let's talk
Like-
about that. Please. And you did a great description on your video, and I'm going to put it in the description of this one so everybody can get a really good deep dive. 20 minutes, boom. Here's the nuts and bolts of it. Please tell everybody what he said he did. What Sheldon thought that he was being arrested for and unfairly imprisoned for the length of time that he was given his sentence.
Well, first, I would want to say, because you're a cop, so I'm sure you've had experiences with gangs. Have you ever met an individual who accidentally rose to the top level of a notorious street gang?
Accidentally?
Yeah, like inadvertently.
All the time. I mean, you would be surprised the level of guys that become like kingpins in the Latin Kings just because they owned a taxi cab company. No, it does not happen. No, you have to do things. You have to earn your jewels. In the Latin Kings, they'll have like 3 and 5 point crowns, and then they'll also have jewels within the points of those crowns that represent rank and sometimes the things that you do within the organization. So yeah, if you're getting a tattoo with 1, 3, 5 points and different jewels in the crown, yeah, you're not just kind of sitting there as a looky-loo, randomly getting skull drug into a bar fight to now you have to defend yourself because your gang brought you into this. It's like a teenager telling his parents, "Mom, no, I didn't drink the booze. My friends made me drink it." No.
Yeah. Well, the reason I bring it up is because if you watch that episode of the Rogan podcast, which I hope is still up for people to watch it, Sheldon takes no responsibility for any of his actions. Like, he's brought on as a guilty guy who has sought and received redemption through his actions post incarceration. And the Innocence Project's role in his case was that he had a 50-year sentence for 1 count of attempted murder and another count that was an aggravated assault. But I also think it's like borderline an attempted murder. And those were stacked on top of each other. So he had 50 years, 25 apiece. And they ended up getting him out early because one of these Innocence Project guys is in with Alvin Bragg and they put in a good word for him. So then he ended up getting out 25 years early on his sentence.
Alvin
But
Bragg
way
being
that
the DA of New York City, correct?
Yeah, of Manhattan specifically. So he ended up making the case that, look, he inadvertently rose to the level of the Bloods. And if you watch the Rogan podcast and you listen real carefully, he even says that he was so notorious that the other gang members, when he said he was going to quit, were happy because he would always bust them on the rules. So he was not only a top-ranking official in that gang, but people were terrified of him because of his actions.
Because he was an enforcer.
Yes. So he ends up going to jail on an arrest for another crime. Long criminal history, obviously. And while he's in jail, he says that 2 people who took something on credit from him, he called it consignment, ended up not paying him. So they wanted to avoid him. And then that case got dropped. So when he got out of prison, he got together the boys and they went to visit these individuals and they assaulted them and their girlfriend in one of the instances. And it's really amazing to watch this because he's like, Joe Rogan will ask him, but he's like, well, did anybody get hurt? And he's like, no, not really. But, they might have got roughed up a little bit.
Yeah.
And then he's like, listen, one of the guys that happened to be standing with him, like, you know, it's just happenstance, may have hit him with a pistol or whatever.
Yeah.
But when you look into the case, this was like an attempted murder. Like,
Mhm.
they beat this guy mercilessly, and they make it seem like, oh, he got 25 years because this other random individual just hit him with the gun. And it's like, well, this is what we call the leader of a criminal enterprise that is ordering somebody to act on his behalf
Mhm.
in concert with him while he's there, and that almost killed that person. Not to mention this innocent girlfriend that happened to be walking with him that didn't own anything, that was also physically assaulted in this. And then there's another case where he did the same thing. So he gets convicted of that, and he's pretending like, oh, he just stumbled into this conviction like it was happenstance.
Mhm. So this guy premeditates a robbery with
Yes.
his gang members that are below him. They
Yes.
see the individual, now victim, and his girlfriend, and decide, finally, we got him. We're going to get our comeback. We're going to get our come up. We're going to get the money back that this guy owed us. And so they take it out on him. He doesn't have the money on him right then and there, I assume, or they take whatever they can off of him because it is a robbery.
Well, he
And
just robbed him of his jewelry and stuff, and as far as he was concerned, they were squared.
yeah. Oh, yeah, man. Easy
Oh, they
peasy.
took the girl's jewelry too, because you know they were squared. That's how you do it.
Well, you got to set a standard, man. You get what about interest, right? Banks tank interest. So do the Crips. So do the Bloods. Just interest happens to be in blood and getting pistol whipped next to your girlfriend.
Yeah. Well, what really bothered me about this one is normally when it's a black individual, like let's be honest, they'll try to blame racism as the underlying cause of this. But the problem
Yes.
that Johnson seemingly would have with that is that he had a black judge, and the black judge reamed him out in his case. He was like, listen, you're a repeat offender, probably because he was, high level member of the Bloods. I feel like that needs repeating. And you're not going to do any, like, you're a menace to society and all of that. And this really upset him. And he was like, look, sometimes, and he actually compared him to a house N-word. I won't say the whole word. Because he was like, he's an enforcer of the white supremacist system on behalf of white people. Well, it turns out that judge was so right, so unbelievably accurate in his assessment that even when Sheldon Johnson got released with the Innocence Project, helping him get a job, helping him do this tour, he was probably going to come out with a book. He still allegedly, wink, wink, went to a old prison beef guy's house and murdered him brutally and dismembered him. So yeah, they were 100% right about this guy.
One of the things that irritated me with the Innocence Project in the interview with Joe Rogan and having, oh my gosh, I keep blanking on his name.
Sheldon Johnson.
Sheldon Johnson. Jeez, Sheldon. I don't know why I keep forgetting his name. I got all these things that I want to talk about, and his name just keeps flying out of my head. So what was the super milk toast white gentleman's name that was a part of the Innocence Project that was there?
I can't believe I'm forgetting this. That's
See,
the
we're
guy
both
that's
in the same boat
always
now.
on. Oh my god.
So what caught me off guard, not off guard, what irritated the shit out of me was I'm watching this gentleman fawn over Sheldon. Just, Sheldon's my brother. I love him. We came up here together. Like, I love him. He's one of mine. He's one of our own. It was just one of those virtue signaling individuals where everything that you're doing, to me, point of view, is so then
It's Josh Dubin, by the way.
Josh Dubin.
I just looked
Josh Dushin is sitting there fawning over this felon that's nearly murdered. I wouldn't be surprised if he murdered people in the past, being a part, because he's Bloods, right? He was a Blood.
Yes.
I'm not saying he definitely murdered somebody, but if he's that high up in the group, you know that he put a green light out on somebody, so he's at least a part of a murder. And it wouldn't surprise me if he pulled the trigger on a couple while he was going up in his ranks. Either way, so Dushin is fawning over Sheldon in just such a. It was either way. So it disgusted me the way that he was doing it, but he was doing it in a way where it seems like he just goes to other like white people parties so then he can go flaunt his black friend around and say, see, do you see what I'm doing? I'm one of the good whites that's fighting for the African Americans because they can't do it themselves. Like, it was gut wrenching to see this dude use.
He is for sure a diagnosable white guilt person. Like, it has infected him. It has spread throughout him. And Joe Rogan had pledged to have this guy on, and he's been doing it every like 4 months to go over different cases, or every 3 months. I think he has him on 4 times a year. And this is how he always is. He's always sucking up. So like his big thing was like, me and Sheldon are the exact same age, but I grew up in wealthy Brooklyn, wealthy area of Brooklyn, and my parents set up my life for me, and he didn't. He just struggled so hard. So like, I could have been him. And it's like, I don't know. I can't see Dubin dismembering somebody, honestly. I think he has a poor constitution for that, if we're being perfectly honest.
The guy looks like he throws up after he falls off of his skateboard and bruises his knee.
Yeah.
One of the other things that caught me, you touched on it too. This really irritated me, is that you have Dushin basically poking fun at the judge, right? So it's not okay to look at Sheldon and say, you know what? We're going to ignore his past. We're going to ignore the way that he was brought up. We're going to ignore that he was poor, right? He doesn't want you to do that. He wants you to look at Sheldon and see that he is a product of whatever failure of society. Like that, it's not his fault. It's society's fault. They let him back. He was poor. He was brought up in crime. He couldn't help it, right? It could have been him. But he doesn't do the same thing for the judge. What's the background for the judge? Is an African-American judge. Like, you're so upset, and you're so upset about New York State and federal policy and law enforcement being racist. But here, like you said earlier, here's an African-American judge that just lays the hammer down on this notorious gang member, I'll say. And the first thing that Dushin says is, yeah, this judge just doesn't get it. He doesn't understand what it's like for how do you know the background of this judge? Why didn't you do a little bit of research on the judge and find out, actually the judge is from the streets. The judge is from the same neighborhood. I'm not saying that he is. I'm saying this could have been potentially.
But like, if you're going to go with the racism argument, like the judge would have had to come up through law school in an earlier period of time in the United States of America than Sheldon would have come up and grew up in, because he's obviously older than him, because he's a judge in New York judging criminal cases, while Sheldon Johnson is like 20 years old, 21 years old at this point in time. So like, this is a guy who is significantly older, significantly more experienced. But yeah, there is no grace or credit given to the judge, who, by the way, again, so accurate, best judge ever. He should get a medal for his original call on this guy, because he was so right.
So yeah, that just the way that Dushin, and that's the only way I'm going to refer to him now, talks about and fawns over Sheldon, fawns over how this guy's my brother, and it's not his fault that he grew up this way, and then completely dismisses the lifestyle choices that the judge makes that puts him in that position. And like you said, that's a very good point too. He's going through the bar exam. He's going through college. He's now, an assistant district attorney, or whatever it might have been in a private practice before he becomes a judge, when potentially it was a lot more difficult for black men to get into those positions.
Yeah.
Right? Potentially. We don't always experience, but I could assume, Yeah,
no, it's definitely you're definitely onto something right there. But I want to go over I sent you some of the cases, and like one of the ones from the top that you have to look into. This one is amazing.
Is it the really creepy
this
white
guy's
woman?
a guilty guy that they try to go. Maybe they won't do that again for a while. But at the top, there's a photo of a woman in it that is like a very low quality photo.
Yeah, she looks like she's got a Tyra Banks massive forehead.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the only photo of her that exists. But this guy is a very interesting case, because the criminal in this particular case, let me get his name correctly, because there's actually a serial killer with one thing off in the name.
Robert Earl Hayes?
Robert Earl Hayes, right? So Robert Earl Hayes is actually one of the original Innocence Project like success stories. In fact, there's a documentary. Not a documentary. There's a play that was adapted to a movie called The Exonerated, where they have 5 stories of inmates that they got out and proved innocent. And he's one of the ones that are featured in that particular play and movie. So his story is like renowned, right?
Okay.
So he actually got tagged for 2 murders. One was a death penalty case in Florida, and one was a murder case in New York State. He was convicted of the death penalty case back in Florida, but the one that they got, that's the same one that they got him exonerated of.
Overturned in the Florida Supreme Court in 1995, it says.
Yeah. So they basically ruled, and when they say exonerated, it's very important. They ruled that the DNA, because it's the early days of DNA under Florida court, that it's not valuable evidence. Like they weren't sure about it back then. Like the type was unreliable in that like kind of testing. So they weren't allowed to do that in the 97 retrial, and he ends up being found not guilty. So they're like exonerated, he's innocent, just straight up, like this guy's an angel.
Wait,
However,
so
when
they get the DNA thrown out because they say back in the 90s, DNA was so new and so fresh that it couldn't possibly have been done correctly to our standards now, taking our standards now and then trying to hold them to the 90s standards. And then because of that, they didn't allow the DNA evidence in at all.
Yeah, they didn't allow it in 97, and I forget if it was the testing method or if it was a new variety of it, but essentially the Florida Supreme Court was very unsure about DNA in 95, so when they did the retrial, because they were really sure he did it, they did not end up convicting him because they needed the DNA. And in that particular story, he killed a horse groomer in a racetrack that he was living at. But anyway, he gets he gets found not guilty. I hate using that word exonerated.
Mm-hmm.
He gets found not guilty. He's in a play like called The Exonerated and all that. But then all of a sudden, New York prosecutors are like, wait a minute. This guy was in and around a crime scene that we ruled a suicide in 1987 before the Florida murder at a horse racetrack where a victim who looks pretty similar to this victim, like same profile, was killed. And by the way, the cops that ruled it a suicide, she was like hung, like cut up, set on fire. You know how many people commit suicide?
Yeah, and
so it was
Airman
like
just did
obviously
that a little
not.
while ago.
Yeah, so they reopened the case for that one, and they end up trying him and convicting him on that case. So what's amazing about this is that for 20 years, Robert Earl Hayes is in the play, performed all over the country. He's in the movie. Again, and it's like, of course it's racist. People were like, oh, white woman, they blame the closest black guy. What's wrong with you? You total schmucks, and all of that. So there's no DNA in the 87 case, but the conviction integrity unit was like, you know what? Let's prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that he was innocent of the Florida case. So that way we can bring it to his parole board to show them, because he's up for parole, that, he's probably innocent on this case as well, so that way he can be released in 2025.
Wait,
the Innocence Project, in one of the greatest own goals in history, redoes that same DNA test, or with the modern technology from the 90s DNA kit.
The Florida one?
Yeah, the Florida one.
So they're trying to prove that there's no way he could have done the Florida one.
Yes,
they used the DNA during this investigation that they're running to prove that the guy that they got out of this is totally innocent. And let me guess. Does the DNA evidence kind of prove that he did it?
It proves overwhelmingly that he is guilty.
Now, I'm looking at this. It doesn't say, it just says murder. And I'm going to assume here, using my reasoning and my ability to deduce, that were these potentially sexual assaults?
Possibly, but I don't remember that at this moment, because I think they were, but I don't want to say that because I don't have the court documents in front of me. But I'm pretty sure that might have been the DNA that they used.
That's my guess would be 2 murders, very similar, women that looked similar, and there's DNA there. My popo senses are tingling. It would say that this is probably seminal fluid at the after effects of a sexual assault, and that's the collected DNA evidence.
So this guy, again, he's in all. Go look up The Exonerated. You will see his story in there. He's one of the 5 or the 6 original innocent guys, 100% guilty. But that's the thing, is like the Innocence Project, when they took up his case, like they're not looking to prove innocence. They're looking to shatter and poke holes in your case. And back in the 90s, they wanted to shine doubt on DNA testing. Now what they do is they try to abuse DNA testing in order to get these people out, because a lot of times they'll have something tested for DNA that they know is going to come up with other profiles, and then they'll say, oh, new suspects. Like one of the tricks that they do is they'll try to test the bottom of people's shoes. But it's like we know, like I took a forensics class when I was in John Jay College. We know that you step on spit and gum and all this nasty stuff. So if you test your shoe bottom for DNA, you're going to get like 6 profiles, especially in an area where there's any kind of foot traffic. So like they'll do tricks like that in order to obfuscate and add magical suspects that don't exist. But at the same time, their original strategy was to try to shout doubt on this, and they ended up destroying their own case later down the road.
What happened with that? So they destroyed their own case. how does this information get out then that they
So
killed their
they
own
pay
case?
for the testing, and by the way, the Innocence Project often tries to suppress testing that doesn't go their way. But the Florida, like I think it was the Florida AG, he was not having any of this. He was like, we knew we got him 20 years ago. He sends that over to the probation board or the parole board in New York, so he doesn't get. Hopefully, he won't get released in 2025 when he's eligible. So they might have totally screwed this guy over.
Jeez, I wonder what the next step of that is, right? So you're found guilty, then you're found, then they throw it out. I won't say innocent, but then they throw out the case. They get you out, and then new evidence comes in and says, "Oh, wait a second, no, we were right the first time." So then, what's Florida gonna do? Pick him up and put him back in the pen?
No, they can't because it's double jeopardy.
That's what I was.
On retrial, he was found not guilty because they couldn't introduce the DNA evidence.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's unfortunate, but at least it will be used against him to hold him in New York prison. Now, granted, the parole board might free him anyway. You know, who knows?
Yeah, welcome to New York. We both know. Catch and release.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, he is in jail for manslaughter, so you know, maybe we might get lucky.
You think he might get like $10,000 bail? Ugh, fingers crossed.
No,
man.
he's in prison because he committed that second murder. They were trying to use the first one to say that he was framed, to say he's innocent on the second one. Which
wait, so you didn't get into that? So how did they prove that he was guilty of the prior one, the one in New York?
He pled guilty to manslaughter because they had him dead to rights. It was the exact same crime.
Yeah,
like it was even it was literally a brunette horse groom. Like it was the exact same crime, and like he pled guilty. He was like, I got nothing.
Yeah, he probably pled guilty nor get a lesser sentence because he knew he was screwed.
Yeah,
it wouldn't surprise me.
Well, he doesn't have life. That's why he's eligible for parole. But yeah, there's other cases. I saw you bring one up on the stream, which was that Maria Lucio, if I got her name right.
Sure. It will actually. That's on the front page of their current. Just going to their website right now.
Wow.
That's on the front. Oh, you're excited. You're like, oh, really? Tell me more. Texas trial court recommends Melissa Lucio's conviction and death sentence be overturned. So conviction and death sentence. What do you know? Do you know the story with her?
Yeah. So unsurprisingly, like this woman is horribly guilty as well. And again, the Innocence Project they've done all kinds of different manipulations with this particular case. And there's a good way for you to see that she's guilty. I don't want you to pull it up because you might get taken down. But if you just look at the state of her infant's like body, like the bruising and all that, this is a woman who denies abusing the infant. There were bite marks on this baby. There were bug bites because she would leave it in filth. And there were bruises all over her. And essentially what they're arguing is that she's an innocent angel. She just happened to have 14 kids. She wasn't crazy at all. She didn't do nothing. And all of the evidence, again, it's not even close, of abuse, history of CPS visiting them, documenting abuse and all that. They just pretend it doesn't exist. Like if you click through that article, it will tell you nothing has ever been presented that says she abused that woman or some absurdity like that. Like it will say that the kid had a rare condition that made bruises pop up. Like after her mom beat her. I mean, I'm not after her mom beat her. Like it's absurd, like what they argue for this particular case. And I think I spoke about it with Ali Beth Stuckey at some point because she was outraged by this.
It gives very little information. It just gives the date.
Well, let me give you the rundown of what Innocence Project always gives, and I'm sure you'll find it. First of all, she maintains her innocence. I don't know if you know that. She maintains her innocence. She says she didn't do it.
Sean, I don't know if you knew this, but there are tons of innocent people in prisons.
That's like one of my favorite.
They're all innocent. They'll tell you too.
That's one of my favorite Innocence Project things. Is they'll say they say they didn't do it. It's like okay.
Oh.
But yeah, we don't, like honestly, this one's a little gruesome when you get into the proofs. So I would go to Julius Jones, which I think I sent you some documents for as well. It might be the fourth one that I sent you. Yeah, it's definitely the fourth one. The content Oklahoma governor one, because that one like it involves like the bruised child.
Attorney
you know
General
what I mean?
of Oklahoma, Mike Hunter.
Yes.
Is it that one? It seems like it's a legal document.
Yeah, so Julius Jones eventually ended up getting his sentence commuted. But to give you the background on this, this is a case that honestly was very it was actually difficult for me to cover because the daughter who was in the car with the victim had reached out to me as I was doing videos on this. So this got like real personal for me at a certain point in time.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, Julius Jones and his associate, somebody called Chris Westside Jordan, they
Chris
were car.
Westside Jordan. He's got an
Yeah,
alias.
yeah. His nickname was Westside.
Oh God. How, what,
So,
were
so
they
these
gang
people
members?
huh?
Were they gang
Oh,
members too?
Jones was, but not Jordan.
Not Westside.
Yeah, no. He was just he was his friend that participated in these crimes, but Julius Jones would later go on to be a high-ranking member of the Bloods, just the
Oh.
Oklahoma one.
Oh.
So Julius Jones, they were trying to steal a car. It's a GMC Suburban. Paul Howell, who was taking his two daughters to buy school supplies with his sister Megan Toby, drove this GMC Suburban. Both Jones and Westside Jordan, you can see this in this like overwhelming evidence of guilt document that I sent you.
Yes, I got it
They
pulled up right now.
Yeah, they spot them at a Brahms ice cream store because after they bought school supplies, they went to get ice cream for them and then follow them home. When Paul Howe opens the door in his parents' driveway, Julius Jones comes up next to him, shoots him one time in the head. The sister grabs the daughters, who are like 9 and 7 at that point in time. They run into the house, and then Jones fires upon them, takes the car, runs over the father's body, and then ends up taking off. Chris Jordan drives the other car away.
Mm-hmm.
So they concocted this whole campaign to say that Julius Jones didn't do anything. Chris Westside Jordan was the actual killer, who, by the way, he pled to a felony murder essentially,
Mm-hmm.
and ended up getting a 30-year sentence for it. So, like, he admits to being part of the crime.
Yeah.
But Jones got the death penalty because he has a lengthy criminal history that was not all prosecuted at the same time. But there was this giant campaign to get him out that was backed by Kim Kardashian. Viola Davis, like, was narrating a documentary on his behalf. And
What?
it all like the amount of things that are untrue in it are just astounding. So they would say Julius Jones is this like star college athlete at Oklahoma University, never played for any Oklahoma team. They say that he never was convicted of a crime before this, which is technically true.
But he was arrested
convicted
for numerous ones.
Well, yeah, but he was also convicted for crimes that he committed before this, after he was convicted of the murder charge. So, like, technically, at the moment he was convicted, for the murder, he was not convicted of any other crime, but they convicted him of other crimes. And guess what? They were armed carjackings
Oh.
in the same area.
What? That's a coincidence.
Yeah.
That's just a
So-
coincidence.
So,
Did
like, one of the
Kim
things that the Innocence
Kardashian,
Project,
just backing up there for a second. This is what the fuck is Kim Kardashian's deal? Because I remember when Trump was in office, her and Kanye were like on this huge spiel of trying to get people out of jail. It was this one of them?
yeah. Well, this is a Kim Kardashian case, but not for Trump because that was a president one. Like, this is the state of Oklahoma.
No, I understand. I'm saying that. Do you remember when Kanye went to go meet with Trump in the
Yes.
at the White House, and herself or Kim and him were then together, and there was like this large campaign with Kanye and Kim, along with other.
To get the drug trafficker out, that old lady who was definitely a drug trafficker, that they downplayed it.
Yes, wasn't she the drug trafficker that like killed like a cop in like New York City or something like that?
I don't think it was that one, but this one was like I remember there was like a serious drug trafficker. There was a different case with somebody who killed a cop that Andrew Cuomo pardoned.
Yeah.
Fucking but or actually didn't pardon. He granted clemency. Like on his way out the door. But in this Jones case, like one of the things that people don't understand is like the Innocence Project, which, by the way, Kim Kardashian's connection to the Innocence Project is that her father, Robert Kardashian, friends with O.J. Simpson,
Yes.
helped assemble the Dream Team at New Barry Schneck. So they're using that connection in order to get her in to use her celebrity for these cases. But one of the things that people don't understand is that they don't have any good arguments. Like for a lot of these cases, they don't have evidence, and there's stuff that they try to introduce in these particular cases that can't be introduced in a court of law. And in fact, was shot down and defeated in a court of law. So one of the things that they do is they try a media campaign. So the Julius Jones case got really popular because of a documentary series that was narrated by Viola Davis called The Last Defense, where they just air the defense's talking points. So Kim Kardashian sees this and she ends up getting on board with this case. Also, there's a pattern with Kim Kardashian where she gets on board with cases where black people kill white people and have alliterated names. So if you look at her cases, it's like Julius Jones, Kevin Cooper, Kevin Keith, Purvis Payne, and all of these people have like, well, Purvis Payne killed most. I'm not. Kevin Keith killed mostly black people, but tried to kill a white person, so that's close enough for her. But yeah, so she really is weirdly into these alliterated names. So
Well, that's how you make people remember things, man. It's a
Yeah.
sound, it's a phrase, it stays in the brain a little bit more.
So with the Jones case, like they produced this documentary, The Last Defense, and they actually decided that they were going to reenact the murder. But instead of spending the money to like build something that looked close enough to the approximate of the driveway, they decided to go to the driveway where Paul Howe was actually murdered, pull up with the GMC Suburban of that year, and recreate the scene in the middle of the night. Now, Paul Howe was murdered in front of his parents' home. They passed away. The person who inherited the home was Megan Toby, the person who was in the
car with him.
Yeah, that saw her brother get murdered. And they pulled up without telling her and reenacted the murder. Sorry.
You can
the
say,
murder
no, you can swear, fuck, shit.
Yeah, in front of her house. Like just randomly, like just bringing back that horror. And all of this was done, by the way, to get the killer out. Like all of this was done to get her out because it was Megan Toby's testimony as one of the primary things that signed, sealed, and delivered this conviction, because she described the outfit that this guy was wearing. Unfortunately for Julius Jones, she was a costume designer. She described the trim in the shirt and all this different detail that had it dead to him. So they do that, and like this is the kind of things that they do, and again, and that documentary is shared by Kim Kardashian. That perspective is put forward by all these different celebrities. That fat British guy, the late night host that everybody hates, like he did a segment on Julius Jones with all these lies, and the family has to reach out to me, who at the time had 130,000 subscribers on YouTube, telling the other side of the story. So it's like it's totally out of balance, totally out of whack. They have these highly produced campaigns in order to get these criminals out. And the crazy thing is even with that, the key point of that documentary was that the killer, the real killer, was wearing this red bandana, and they were trying to get DNA testing for it. And the documentary ends when they get the DNA or when they're approved for the DNA testing on a cliffhanger. Well, guess what? The DNA testing came back Julius Jones, and then they never stopped. They still defend him. Even though they said whoever wore that bandana was the killer, they get the testing. It was Julius Jones, confirming he's the killer. They just never talk about the bandana again. They pretended it didn't exist. And then they pivot to a bunch of different things, start attacking the sister. She's receiving death threats from all these different people who watched this stupid movie. So not only do they reenact the documentary, reenact the death in front of her home, again, that she was actually a literal witness to, but they then direct people to harass her and get her to change her testimony to free this monster. And by the way, Julius Jones was selling sneakers, branded sneakers, as a part of his campaign at the time. So yeah.
Dude, that's one of the most disgusting things I've ever heard. And this kind of goes into a larger aspect of, like, I don't want to say it's just New York State. There's definitely other states out there, but New York State specifically, the rights of victims get trampled on horribly, just for the sake of the altar of trying to make the defendant, who is the defendant for a reason, look good or protect them somehow. So there's all these legal protections for the defendant, for the suspect in the case, but there are none for victims. I'll give you an example. I used to be in our special victims unit where it dealt with sexual assault. And there was a specific incident where an underage young girl was assaulted by an older male. It was a member, like a family friend or something like that. Or no, it was unfortunately, it was a gang assault where she was abducted. And the defense would try to make this young, special needs, underage female victim seem uncredible, have no credibility on the stand, ask them horrible questions that had nothing to do with a fact-finding mission on the case or what exactly happened, but trying to make the victim look so inept that, oh, this thing couldn't have possibly happened. Or, and I'm not even joking here, that she enjoyed it.
Right.
So therefore, there was consent. Oh, she enjoyed it, which means there's consent. Which, by the way, no. There's a lot of things. There's a gross portion of sexual assaults where just because you're being assaulted and you're in fear for your life, you can still finish. You can still ejaculate, both male and female, during the assault. And there are disgusting defense attorneys that will say, well, because you came, you must have enjoyed it. And because you enjoyed it, it's not assault. And obviously, this is completely disproven. If you went to a domestic violence seminar or you talk to women that are survivors of this domestic violence, you would know, and especially in law enforcement too, where you're trained on some of these things. Just because you're married doesn't mean you get to have sex with your partner whenever you want at the drop of a hat. You can still assault your partner in a marriage. If they no means no. And to have all these trainings, all these we need to protect women, hashtag Me Too's, all these things that these bleeding heart people will go and stand up and beat their chest for, when it comes down to it and there's a victim of that assault, these defense attorneys, quote unquote, these slime balls, will throw all of that out the window. And they'll go and they'll attack the innocent person that was already attacked. So seeing, or you telling me that Kim Kardashian's production crew drove up to this woman's...
It's not her crew, but this is the documentary she's promoting.
There we go. The documentary that she's producing. So, I mean, I would say that these people are somewhat still under her responsibility. She is still liable for the actions of these people. The documentary
is Viola Davis associated, and then Kim Kardashian found out about that case through the documentary.
Well, then we'll leave Kim out of this. Either way, the production company, whoever that goes there, I hope that woman is suing them. I mean, you can't just go up on somebody's private property, driveway or not, and then recreate something at their home in the middle of the night and then leave. At the least, you need a city permit.
I mean, the crazy thing is like, you know, a lot of people don't think about how unethical true crime as entertainment can be, and this is like a perfect instance of that. But the thing is I believe the documentary is in part produced by the Innocence Project because they're a propaganda arm. Like one of the major cases that they produced, you might have heard of it, is the Stephen Avery case, the Making a Murderer.
I was just about to talk about that. Oh, Sean, Sean, that makes me upset. That entire documentary, that's not even a documentary. That entire, I will say, multi-episode piece of entertainment of crime porn is just nonsense. The way that they set up to make the department look absolutely disgusting and left out huge pieces of evidence to make it seem like, oh, this guy was like, what? They found her burnt body in his backyard, and with tons of other things. I'm forgetting on it because it used to be fresh in my mind because it was something I was eventually going to make a video on, but then, you know, strike while the iron's hot. It cooled down. Nobody cared about Making a Murderer anymore, and they realized just how much of a disgusting piece of shit this guy was.
I was gonna make a video on it as well, and like as I was thinking about it, because something came up with the case, the Daily Wire featuring Candace Owens actually dropped a multi-part like series, basically a response to Making a Murderer, and they gave me screeners to see it, so they actually did a pretty good job. And to say that they distorted or covered up evidence is like insanely minimizing what they did. There's overwhelming evidence of guilt, but my favorite Stephen Avery story is that there was an author, and his name eludes me at this moment, but when Avery was convicted of the sexual assault before the murder, the one that he was exonerated from first, this guy wrote a book, and the book was about how Avery was like, he basically got screwed over by this police department, and they did a sloppy investigation, and the DNA proved that he was innocent. And like, this was the thing. So after Avery was convicted of the murder, they reached out to the same author, and they're like, hey, could you write a book about how Stephen Avery is innocent of this murder? So the guy looks into the case, and he's like, okay, this guy's so guilty, I'm gonna write a book about how guilty he is. So the same guy that was advocating for him based on the evidence looks at the evidence in this case, and he's like, for the police to have framed him for this, they would have had to randomly decide to kill someone, have Avery do things like make an alibi call, happen to coincidentally be stalking this girl, and all these different other things that Stephen Avery like did that clearly show he's the killer, have like almost all of her bones, even fragments, on on the premises of the property, like the fire, like he burned her up in a burn pit. There's also so many lies that Avery told about like, oh, I didn't have a fire, and then a witness said he had a fire. He's like, okay, I did have a fire. Like there's so many things in the Avery case.
If I'm not mistaken, he called her work pretending to be her.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know about that. I know he lured her to the property, right? With a star 69 number,
So
right?
Star
Like
67, I believe, blocks it.
Star 67 to block the star 69 is called back. Star 67 number twice. He lured her to the property. He denied that she ever showed up to the property, but he called her for an alibi call after the fact to say that she never showed up. So like he specifically unblocked his number to say, hey, she never showed up, to give him an alibi that he never saw her.
Yeah.
But then had to change his story after the fact to show that he saw her. And by the way, the whole thing in the Making a Murderer is like, oh, they forced Brandon Dassey into a confession. If you watch the tape, they did get consent to interrogate him. And unlike what you see, there's a moment in the Netflix docu-series where they feed him a key piece of information where they're like, it's Avery that shot her. And then Dassey repeats he shot her. And they're like, oh my God, he never even got that information without them saying it. Dassey said like 2 sentences before that he shot him.
Oh, okay, because they made it seem like they planted that.
Yeah, that they fed him that.
Speaking
Like
of which, what was up with the there was like a vial of blood that had like Avery's DNA in it. It was like a vial of Avery's blood that was from like a previous, some sort of drawing or whatever. And they're going like, hey, we need to see, you know, like where this test tube of his blood is. And they go to it and it's breached. And then they try to say like, oh, hey, his blood, this vial of his blood was breached. And guess what? There's blood droplets in her car, and it looks like it was sprayed there, not like it was like a person was bleeding and moving around. Straight up saying, hey, this police department went into the evidence locker, took out evidence that had DNA of Mr. Avery, and then intentionally placed it there, and then put the evidence back. Do you know anything about like what actually happened?
Yeah, so
please inform me, because that part blew my mind.
This is actually the easiest debunk of all time. If you've ever gotten blood drawn into a tube in your entire life, you have to puncture the hole in the top for your blood to go in the tube. So yeah, there is a hole in the top of it from when they drew Avery's blood. Like,
you're making too much sense.
Yeah. So you can actually, if you look up any video of any blood draw, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that's what's happened, but like they pretend like that hole, which by the way is like the needle hole if you pay attention to it.
Yes.
And they try to pretend like somebody dipped a syringe in there and pulled it out.
That's what they were saying.
Yeah, there's chain of custody with that. It's never been broken on like how many times they've gone into that vial or whatever. But all you would have to do is know one nurse or EMT to know that that was complete and utter nonsense.
Total bullshit.
So yeah, that thing about planting the evidence, about planting the blood, nonsense. But more importantly, Avery had DNA of his on the latch underneath this woman's car, the murder victim, because when he opened the hood, he grabbed it. Now, what they're saying is that he was sweating and some skin cells like came off in the sweat and got embedded under there. Now, there's a lot of things that the police theoretically could plan if you're making conspiracy stuff. The sweat, skin cells, no.
Yeah.
That is not a thing you take at any point in time during your investigation. So, and it also doesn't survive long outside. It's something like a 23-day thing for like that kind of touch DNA for it to survive. Now, granted, it was in a hood that was closed, so maybe it preserved a little bit better
without direct sunlight. The direct sunlight damages it immediately, like your toast.
Yeah, but it was on the closed on the other side of the hood, so like maybe like that. But yeah, there's so much overwhelming evidence in terms of Avery's guilt, and they show you none of it. And what's great about Candace Owens' Daily Wire documentary, I know they broke up recently, so it's controversial for me to compliment them both, is that they'll interview people, they'll interview the lawyers and people who appeared in there that they cut out of context, that they, you know, that they played this snippet, and then they'll interview the filmmakers and they're like, well, you left this out. Well, they're like, yeah, well, we're making a TV series.
Yeah,
like,
not a documentary.
Yeah, this isn't a court. This wasn't a court. And like my friend Devin Tracy says this all of the time. And Atheism is Unstoppable on YouTube, and censored actually now because he got banned from YouTube. The problem with the court of public opinion is that it's not a court.
Correct.
There are no rules. You can introduce whatever evidence that you want.
It's the
And that's
mob.
exactly what happens with these documentaries.
So this is just like a personal point of view. When I was watching these documentaries and stuff that was happening on, because like before COVID, and was it Making Murder? Was that before COVID or was that during COVID?
Before
I know
COVID, for
it was
sure.
before COVID. I know like these documentaries on Netflix were really big, like during that time and then during COVID. And right just before that Avery documentary came out, Making a Murderer, just we're in the film industry a little bit, right? You and I, we make videos, we post things, we write down scripts. We are trying to be infotainment. Hey, here's a piece of information that we find that we would like to share. Let's make it easily digestible and make it entertaining so that people can retain the knowledge that we have, and then we can all, talk about it later on. Be smarter. Yay, go America, right? So looking at these documentaries on Netflix prior to the Avery case, I was like, man, these things, it's not hard to see that it's a 6-episode series and they're going to leave cliffhangers so that you keep watching the episodes until you watch the entire series. And you're like, okay, there's a little bit of writing that has to go on here and there. And then the more and closer that it got to the Avery documentary, the more and more I saw this just overall deception of, oh, here, it's a documentary, or it's peddled as a documentary, and it is in no way, shape, or form a documentary. It is just entertainment. They omit huge facts. Like if you're making a documentary on the Discovery Channel, you're not just going to leave out the Paleolithic era and then just, oh, nope, we just got these other things. Dinosaurs, what are those?
Like I remember watching it at the time, and I was like, wow, they're really, really well made. So I studied criminal justice when I was in school, but I minored in film because I like film and video production and all that. Netflix, 10 out of 10 in terms of production value of these things, the graphics, the music, it all comes together in a way that is quite compelling. But the thing is like you rewatch that and you're like, wait a minute, how did they convict him? They have no case because they don't present any evidence from that side. You're like, how could any jury convict him? And like that was people's takeaway. That's why they came out and protested and all that, because they were like, this is such an injustice. There was no evidence in this case. And then you go actually look at the evidence and you're like, wait a minute, this was overwhelming, undeniable evidence in this case. And then you look at what they actually presented to you. Like the prosecutor in that case, they were like, oh, remember the section of the documentary where he was texting an intern like sexually explicit messages, not even images? They're like, yeah, what a jerk. He's cheating on his wife. 12 years later has nothing to do with the case at all. But there's like all the smear tactics put in there against everybody who's against Avery. And when you actually break it down and compare what they claim to the actual evidence presented, you're like, oh no, Avery, it's completely the other way. It's not even close.
Yes.
Like every single one of you, if you were in that courtroom, would have convicted Avery of that murder. Like, in fact, if you fell asleep through half the trial, you probably would have still convicted him. 99% chance. Because he's so guilty. It's so absurd.
I guess what piques my interest with that one too is the first arrest where he was made and then found not guilty of. I don't even remember like how that entire thing started. Like the cops didn't like the guy who was in on the girlfriend, and then they were like, "Ah, yeah, he killed her," and then just wrongfully convicted.
The first one was a rape, so he was found guilty originally on that. And like the victim, this happens sometimes. She did describe Avery, but I think they showed him again. This is in the Netflix documentary, so who knows? But they showed one image of Avery that kind of looked like the guy, so like that's who she kind of identified. And then they try to make it seem like the sketch artist drew more Avery despite her describing something else. I don't know if that's true. But then later on, the DNA came back not him. So that's how he got out on the first case. So, but then the murder is just overwhelmingly him. And they try to make it seem like they didn't like him. But one of the things you find out in the Candace Owens documentary is like, this guy was arrested multiple times for doing crazy stuff, like pulling his gun on his, like he pushed his sister, I believe, off the road in his vehicle, like vehicle to vehicle collision, and then pointed a rifle at her. So one of the things that they don't tell you in the Making a Murderer documentary is that Stephen Avery did serve 18 years in prison, but 6 years was for that incident that I just described to you, and 12 years was for the rape.
Oh, no shit. I didn't know that at all.
Yeah, because they don't tell you that. They try to make it seem like, oh, 18 years for a wrongful rape conviction, but in reality, it was 6 years for that assault with a deadly weapon.
What was the amount of time that he served in total for, let's say, during the rape and the robbery, right?
That was that. Well, it wasn't a robbery, but that was the 18 years
Or
total.
okay. So he served his entire time.
No. Then he ended up getting out. I don't remember what his original sentence was for that, but he ended up getting out after they found him. You know, the DNA test for the rape. But 6 years was for sure for that assault with a deadly weapon, where he pushed his sister off the road and pointed a firearm at her, or his cousin. Who knows? There's so many Averys out there.
Yeah, and that poor kid that's soft in the head. Is that kid seems a little soft? Like even during the interviews, I'm looking at like this kid's a little soft. Something's going on.
I will say they're like, look, they paint Dassey as a very sympathetic figure, right? And
Yes.
like there is a lot of Stephen Avery, you know, kind of like coached him up into doing this, right? But there's something that never appears ever in the Making a Murder documentary.
Drop this knowledge bomb on me.
Yeah, and it's Brendan Dassey's testimony. So at one point in time, Brendan Dassey had left, right? And he was separated from Avery. She was still alive, and he could have called 911. He could have called. He actually had his mother in the trailer that was nearby. He could have went to her for help and all that, and he didn't do that. Instead, he came back in, and according to him, he raped her before she was murdered. And they asked him why he didn't do that, and he like looks directly at them and he says, "I wanted sex."
Ugh.
So, like, you know, like, listen, he's a little slow. He's suggestible. Like, you know, he's a borderline, you know, artard. Like, we get that. Like, it is true. But at the same time, like, he knows right from wrong.
Oh yeah.
He could have intervened and saved this woman's life, but like, he wanted to have sex with her.
Yeah.
So, like,
Hey, he made the decision. No sympathy from me. I'm good.
all right. And of course, a lot of people don't see that part. Like, they kind of just pretend it doesn't. I mean, if you watch Making a Murderer, you didn't see that part. It's not in there.
Correct. All you see is this poor soft kid that could barely spell and says "all" all the time, and you're just like, "Oh, what's going on here?" But once again, that little bit of skepticism that I had going into it, knowing that this was a piece of entertainment.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because like a lot of these documentaries, and here's the crazy thing, to pivot back to Jones first. So Jones had a lawyer that they paint as this total, complete, and utter buffoon, and they say he never tried a death penalty case. But the thing is that this guy's like was a public defender, and like, you know, from being an officer, that like public defenders like litigate more cases than anyone.
So many.
So he had tried a bunch of homicide cases. The only thing that mattered about the death penalty was when they get to the death penalty phase of the case. So I actually talked to this lawyer after they decided to commute his sentence to life in prison, and he was very pissed off in the way that they were portraying him as a doofus, as an idiot, and all of that, because he's actually a really competent lawyer in that particular area, and he feels like they cut his words out of context. So he was explaining how he wanted to advocate for Julius Jones. He still sees him as his client. Anytime he loses a case, he wants to advocate for them. But even he was like, yo, they did me dirty with all these like different things. So like, he was just shitting on, like, they try to put forward the family alibi. So for Julius Jones, like, there's so many witnesses,
What's the
surveillance.
family alibi? What do you mean? Like the family members were like, "Oh no, he was at home."
I'm gonna get to it. So like, you have witnesses, DNA, and all this stuff that places him, you know, as the killer.
Yes.
But the family wanted a lie for him. So they said that Julius Jones, the night of the murder, was eating spaghetti and playing Monopoly and eating a big birthday cookie that whole night. That's the alibi.
Spaghetti takes me at least 2 hours, Sean. So it totally makes sense. And a cookie after that?
Yeah.
I'm taking
a big birthday cookie.
So
And Julius Jones, and I'm not joking, this is in the documentary. Julius Jones, his obese sister was stealing his birthday cookie. Because, you know, you got to play into to type.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you?
to be clear, they had a non-family witness because it's a little suspicious that in the 11th hour you come up with an alibi. So they said that there was this non-family witness, a teacher that can confirm the alibi. Now this would have been like what you
Huge.
needed.
Yeah.
Third party, upstanding member of the community and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is this woman was really honest. So she was like, "Oh, I did go over to the Jones house, and in fact, I went to Kinko's first." And in fact, I saved the receipt from the Kinko's, like from that day. So she presents the receipt to the attorney at the time. And this is the attorney that I've spoken to on stream. And again, this is in the evidence. And the receipt's for the day before the murder. So they don't have an alibi for the murder.
No, because that was the day before.
Yes.
The whole cookie and spaghetti was the day before. I mean, that's pretty good, though. That's a pretty good fake alibi, though. You have an actual event. You just changed the date and time. So that way everybody's stories link up because it was an actual event.
Oh, and this woman also, has reportedly received threats from the Jones family to change her story.
What?
And Julius Jones also wrote letters to his girlfriend threatening her if she doesn't if she's not going to lie to the police, just say that she doesn't know anything. So, but my favorite Julius Jones fact of like why he's guilty is he's like, first of all, he says he never stole any cars or anything like that. So he was convicted of the theft of a Mercedes after he was convicted of the death penalty case.
Yes,
Now,
because like you said, there were open cases. He was being charged, but they just were never completed. So his murder charge was completed first,
Yes.
and then all these subsequent cases that happened prior to, well, they ended up being completed after the murder conviction. So go ahead.
So my favorite one is this Mercedes case. So first of all, Julius Jones is seen by multiple witnesses in this Mercedes. He stole it from a doctor, and it was a new Mercedes. So it was newly bought. So it actually had a paper registration, and back in the 1990s, you would actually have to write it down, like physically in pen. So Julius Jones spelled Mercedes wrong. Like he spelled it with the Z at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In his registration form that he would present to the police to show it's legit. So he says that he was forced into this guilty plea and he didn't actually do it because they were threatening him and that's how they made him plead guilty. Now, what they were threatening this man with after he was already convicted of capital murder and set to be executed, I have no idea. Right? I would think he would just want to be out of death row, like for the trial phase, honestly. But he said even though he confessed to this in court, he did not actually steal this car. But here's the thing. In Oklahoma, when you do a guilty plea, you have to do a verbal and a written confession. And wouldn't you know it, 6 years later, in Julius Jones's written confession, he still can't spell Mercedes. He still spelled it with the Z.
And it probably matched up perfectly, too.
One, he stole that car. And two, Julius Jones can't spell Mercedes if you spot him 6 years.
Right? Oh, my God. That's hysterical.
Just
his defense attorney's looking at him like, Julius, it's with an S. Just don't forget. It's with an S. He's like, I got this. And he's like, Z. Fuck!
So one of the things that pissed me off about this is Matt Schlapp, the head of CPAC, actually endorsed Julius Jones. And in his video, he said that, sometimes DNA evidence like sets these people free years later. Yeah. Of course, he didn't know
that there was DNA evidence done on the mask already, like you said.
Yeah, that it already proved him guilty. But, so we got to confront Matt Schlapp, me and Nuance Bro. And I will say, Nuance Bro should have asked him this question. I really wish he would have, because Matt Schlapp's wife's name is Mercedes, which was the next time you see Julius Jones, ask him to spell your wife's name.
Dude, I just started following Nuance Bro. I've known who he is for years, but I just started following him on Twitter because I just started getting a little bit more active on Twitter. And
he's a good guy.
He cracks me up.
Yeah, but it is crazy how extensive these campaigns go. And again, that's CPAC that's backing the Innocence Project. Like,
huge.
I will say I got to give credit to there's 4 or 5 people that are into it, and I hope you join the club now that get into these Innocence Project cases, because it's like me, Devin Tracy, Allie Beth Stuckey from The Blaze, who does mostly a Christian show on The Blaze, but she's into these cases, and a couple of other people, and I apologize for forgetting the names. They're like the only ones covering these cases, like these Innocent Project cases. Oh, Roberta Glass podcast is she goes hard on these cases.
I mean, it's meat on the bone. It's a tee. Like, it's teed up for just a grand slam to knock it out of the park with all this nonsense.
Jack Pozobic also. He went to bat for me in the Julius Jones thing. So.
I know who that guy is.
Yeah,
I'm
he got
blanking on
him.
his face, but the name is super familiar. I know who that is. I
Yeah,
think
he's
I follow
probably
him on Twitter as well.
yeah, probably. He's very big Twitter following, but he's also on board for that. So, yeah, it's very few people calling this out, and it's because the Innocence Project has a great marketing team. They have a great marketing campaign. First of all, the name sounds great.
Yeah.
Nobody wants guilty people in prison. But
Nobody
when you
wants
look into
people on
their
death
cases,
row if they're a bleeding heart, which I shouldn't say bleeding heart for that. We said in the beginning.
yeah,
I understand. You know, all life is sacred, and you don't want somebody to die. So look, you're right. It's got a great shtick. We're letting people out of jail that are innocent. We're helping those that have been treated unfairly in the justice system, and we're not allowing, state-sanctioned murder.
yeah.
Like that all sounds super great. It all sounds super. What could be the downside?
Yeah, I mean, there is basically no downside except for almost all these cases. The criminal is guilty, and
Is
like
there
you're destroying the
is
lives
there
of
a
the family.
good case that they have that where they've actually done the right thing, or are they
I'm
all
sh-
just complete and utter pieces of shit that they're letting out?
So I'm trying to grant them that there has to be somewhere because like there are a bunch of these so-called exonerations that are like, again, it was a rape and murder, and the guy who did the rape, who left the semen, is probably guilty of the murder as well.
Makes
So when
sense.
they do the DNA, like they let that person out, I'm sure it happens for sure. But they got a lot of really bad ones. I mean, Rodney Reed is another one that, is currently going back and forth in Texas right now. Of
Did you
course,
send me
back
that
by
one?
I did send you it's the long document, second one from the top. And yeah, like I mean, Rodney Reed is a serial rapist and his DNA was found inside this woman and they're trying to frame the cop for her murder, her cop fiance. And like if you get into the Rodney Reed case, it's like a grand conspiracy against Rodney Reed for no reason. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot.
Yeah, the reason I send that document is because Rodney Reed, like Julius Jones in 2015, won additional DNA testing, and the additional DNA testing with DNA that wasn't even really known to exist back in the 1990s came up Rodney Reed. So,
And
like
you saying like murder and sexual assault.
yeah, rape and murder. So Rodney Reed's a serial rapist. So the reason they even caught him was because he attempted to rape another woman around the same age, brunette, white female, around the same area. She fought him off, and that ultimately led to his arrest 11 months later. When they run his DNA through the system, they find out that there was a third woman, which was 6 months before the murder victim, Stacy Stites, that raped her right by the same area. Same time around there, same victim profile.
So let me understand this, just so that we're on the same page. There's a guy that is found guilty of a murder and a rape,
Yes.
and then is caught because he attempts to rape another woman. So we've got attempted rape now, 2 separate instances. And then because of all this additional information, there is a third discovered that they're like, okay, cool. This guy has 1 attempted, 2 completed sexual assaults, and 1 of those ended in a murder.
I'm sorry. I think you miscounted because it's actually 7 completed because he's a serial rapist.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So-
Didn't know that there was a couple more people in there.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
including a 12-year-old girl who his semen somehow ended up in her anus. So, like, explain that one away.
Well,
Rodney.
I bet you. I'm sure that the Innocence Project will try and say that she seduced him and got a turkey baster.
So unlike in Oklahoma, where I guess they just want to prosecute the hell out of people, in Texas, if they convict you of capital murder, they don't try you on all the other things. So technically, he's not convicted. I mean, his DNA is all over those victims, but he's not convicted in that particular case, or in those particular cases because he got the capital murder conviction. But his DNA is in those people. But here's what's crazy about Rodney Reed. Rodney Reed killed Stacy Stites.
Mm-hmm.
Pure, undeniable, simple. He says, oh, but here's the thing. Stacy Stites, this 19-year-old girl who is engaged to a cop in a neighboring town. She was working at HEB in order to save money for the wedding.
Mm-hmm.
She was his secret girlfriend that would meet with him. This guy's almost 30 or past 30 at the time, at 2:30 in the morning before she would go for her 3:30 shift, and they would bang in the car, and he would finish the process inside of her when she wasn't on birth control, and then she would go about her day at work, right? So this was his defense, of course, that he only put forward after they asked him if he knew who she was. 11 months after she was murdered, by the way, when he was arrested for that other crime, after they had the DNA coming back, and he signed a statement saying that he had never heard of, didn't know Stacy Stites or anything like that. So after they proved his DNA, then she became the secret girlfriend.
Oh.
Like, let's be clear about the timeline.
Obviously.
But here's the thing that you don't know. Texas, really racist. So black man dating a white woman,
Uh-oh.
you're too racist for that.
Way
You
too
don't
racist.
understand that.
Yeah, can't do that in Texas. Not in the 80s.
Yeah. Now, granted, to be fair to Rodney Reed, I don't blame him for using this explanation, because in 1987, this was in the 90s, the Stacy Stites case.
Okay.
In 1987, Rodney Reed was accused of raping a white woman, and when it went to court, he said that was my secret girlfriend, and he beat those charges in 1987. So he tried the same exact tactic, basically 10 years later.
Hey man, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, exactly. And again, he denies all these other cases, even though it's like 7 women. Like, if you go in there, you could when you search the DNA, maybe I can find the page for you really quickly. Like, if you go in there, you realize that, or it's actually, a lot of it's at the top where it says the different, some of the different victims or what they newly swabbed. But let me see if I can find it. If you go in there, you'll find like this guy is like repeatedly getting hit up for the same exact crimes. And it's absurd that he would make the conclusion that that anybody can make the conclusion that he's innocent. But they got a story, they framed the cop, like the cop boyfriend. They obviously blame racism.
Of course.
Yeah, so if you go to page on the PDF, if you go to page 10, it will go to the explanation, because they basically say, look, there's more DNA now that proves that you're guilty.
Yeah, there's the 12-year-old says right there. Connie York,
Yeah.
Lucy Iper, a 12-year-old.
Yeah, the 12-year-old is AW, but if you go through that, that's all these different women right here. And then there's people who had withdrawn accusations or whatever that he was in relationships with that he abused. Like, you know how domestic situations work, where like you'll get abused by your partner that's also the father of your kids. So then you'll make the accusation, then you withdraw it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a long pattern of behavior. But like the way that they the way that they get around this is, of course, they blame racism. Like, it's the number one tactic, because Rodney Reed, he had a majority or all white jury in this case.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know, like, if you go to a white part of town and you like rape and murder a white woman, you're gonna get a disproportionately white jury. Like,
yeah, if you commit a crime in Salt Lake City, Utah, probably gonna be a jury full of whites.
Yeah, I mean, like in the Julius Jones case, same thing. He went to Edmond from Oklahoma City, a white suburb, killed a white guy, and they're like, yeah, he had a lot of white people on his jury when he committed this murder where no black people lived.
What are you gonna do? Ship him in from Chicago? Right? I'll never understand that defense. Like, I get it a little bit, but I also just go, you're gonna need more than that. So wait, so the Innocence Project is working with this guy? Tell me what they're doing with the Innocence Project.
So Rodney Reed. So essentially, in this case, just like in the Julius Jones case, they're framing a guy called Chris Westside Jordan.
Yes.
In this case, they're framing the ex fiance, or he's the fiance. Technically, she died while they were engaged. I don't know how that's counted, right? Jimmy Fennell, right?
The cop?
Yeah, the cop in a neighboring town. And essentially what they're saying is that Jimmy Fennell did the murder and he framed Rodney Reed, which is an excellent theory that falls apart completely when you realize that...
It's a brilliant theory. Unfortunately, it has no standing whatsoever on its own.
It's okay, so he framed Rodney Reed because Rodney Reed was sleeping with his girl and he was mad because he's racist and a cop, and also
it's Texas and it's the 90s, so yes,
yeah.
Of course. I'm picking up what you're putting down.
But the thing is, and like you'll know this from working cases, when somebody's intimate partner gets murdered, like they're the number one suspect until another suspect emerges.
Yeah.
So Jimmy Fennell, if he wanted to frame Rodney Reed, probably should have framed Rodney Reed because he was the number one suspect for this crime for 11 months. Like, they were investigating and reinvestigating him over and over again. So, like, the argument I guess you would have to put forward is that he didn't know who Rodney Reed was, but he was mad at her for the affair, possibly, right? And then he happened to leave the car right by Rodney Reed's house that she was driving. It never really fits, like, the framing, you know what I mean? Because it's either he's doing too much to frame or too little to frame based on the information that he had. because how can he leave the car a half a mile away from Rodney Reed's home if he doesn't know who Rodney Reed is? But if he knows who Rodney Reed is, why doesn't he frame Rodney Reed so he's not the number one suspect for 11 months?
Yeah, why park so far away from Rodney's house? Why not get a couple blocks closer?
Yeah, and then everything completely falls apart. There's no way for him to transport himself from that neighboring town over. They investigated the mileage, so when the cops take out their cars, they have to document the mileage, and it was not altered or anything like that. So there was like no case against Jimmy Fennell. Not to mention the fact that Stacey Stites' mother lived on the first floor of this like apartment, and in order for him to have killed her in the apartment, he would have had to have carried her body down these rickety ass stairs in front of Stacey Stites' mother's door, who would watch to see her daughter get in the car and drive off to work to make sure she was okay. So there's like, unless the mother's in on it, like there's no way for this to make sense. But the thing that they like to trick you with, because technically Rodney Reed raped and murdered Stacey Stites, is that Jimmy Fennell is kind of a bad guy, because 10 years later, he raped a woman that he was called to be on a patrol call for. So he ended up going to prison for that.
Gross.
Because he's a bad guy. But they try to conflate the two by saying, well, he raped this woman and Stacey Stites was raped. Therefore, Jimmy Fennell is like the person who killed her. But the problem is Jimmy Fennell's semen is not the one that's in her. It's Rodney Reed's. So like it doesn't quite fit. But yeah, he is a bad guy. Like he did commit that crime 10 years later. Now maybe.
You think the Innocence Project is going to pick up his case?
Well, he's guilty and then convicted and served his time, which, by the way, 10 years in prison as a cop, not the best time, I'm assuming.
No,
but like maybe I don't know. Like maybe he was always a bad guy. He was always going to commit that rape. But maybe there was some impact of his wife being raped or his fiance being raped and murdered 10 years before. Who knows, right?
So what is the Innocence Project doing with him? They're just throwing all this shade out there and saying...
basically they're trying to frame Jimmy Fennell for the crime and blame racism and all that. And but the problem is with the Rodney Reed conspiracy is the more people in on a conspiracy, the quicker it falls apart.
Correct.
But because this was the cop's fiance and it was technically between jurisdictions, because he was a Bastrop cop but she was murdered in the neighboring town, they brought in the Texas Rangers to supervise the investigation.
Oh.
Then they brought in a special prosecutor to prosecute the case. So for this framing to work, Jimmy Fennell would have to get a neighboring police department to help him frame this case, also coordinate with his police department, also coordinate with the Texas Rangers, also coordinate with the special prosecutor, which, the reason they sent in the special prosecutor and the Texas Rangers is because they thought it was Jimmy Fennell from the jump.
Right, and they wanted to make sure that if a cop's involved in it, they don't start,
Yeah.
Listen, I think we're all kind of aware that if a police officer is charged with a crime or suspected of one, there's so many more checks and balances when it comes to the legal process. I mean, New York alone. Oh my God, New York alone. Dude, I could go on an hour and talk about Letitia James and how she's just headhunting cops with her new, if you have 5 complaints in 2 years, then we're going to open an investigation on you and figure out what's going on with you. When an internal affairs investigation can be opened on a police officer, not from a citizen complaint, but from just internal affairs saying, oh, hey, you got in a car accident. Were you at fault? Oh, you weren't? Okay, cool. That's one complaint. Hey, you showed up to work late 2 days in a row. You've got a letter of reprimand. That's a complaint. So all you have to do is mess up once or twice, something small, and then have some person that's upset that they got a traffic ticket legally. And now you've got Letitia James up your ass.
Yeah.
And I could say even worse things about a homicide investigation. It was an in-custody death in a neighboring town called Lockport, where they knew the officers were completely 100% not at fault and did what they could, and then still railroaded them for 18 months until eventually the stress got to I think all but one of them just ended up forced retiring. They said, oh, you know what? I'm not going to finish my career here. Why would I? I'm just going to retire and get out because I'm not wanted here. I'm not that they're not wanted there, but Letitia James doesn't want them there.
I mean, look, Letitia James very much got that position so that she could catapult herself to the governor's mansion. That's why she took out Andrew Cuomo.
Well,
and I'm not a
which is strange because why didn't she then run against Kathy Hochul? She was supposed to.
I think she cut some kind of deal with Hochul. I think she was trying to damage Cuomo, but not kill him. But she inadvertently killed him. Like she was trying to wound the beast. But when you look at look, I'm not a fan of Andrew Cuomo. When you look at some of those allegations, like him undressing a woman with his eyes as part of the sexual harassment, you realize how stupid it actually is.
Yeah, it sounded ridiculous. He kissed a woman on the cheek. He like touched some woman's shoulder. I
He's
don't remember all
Italian.
of it, but I do remember some of the complaints. I was like, "What are we talking about here?" Like, what's?
But I will say, yes, there are different additional protocols for police investigations. It appears that they were taken in this Rodney Reed case, but there's a lot of conspiracies, and like, you know, I mean, if you believe that for no reason, like 57 people minimum conspired to frame Rodney Reed for this crime, then like have at it. But I have seen the darker side of humanity with that particular case. One of these Rodney Reed Facebook pages I noticed was attacking somebody in their comment section, and I was like, that name is so familiar. And if you actually have that page up, you might be able to recognize it. It's called Vivian Hardbottle.
Wait, which one are we talking about? We're talking about Reed.
The Rodney Reed case. Her name should come up right there. Vivian Harbottle.
Is it on the page 10 where the victims are?
Yeah, on page 10. It should be right at the top.
Got it. Vivian Harbottle.
So that is the woman that she was raped 6 months before Stacey Stites was murdered, and she had no idea who did it. And they told her when they ran the DNA that they found the guy, and it turned out to be Rodney Reed. So I actually saw one of these free Rodney Reed Facebook pages harassing her, saying that she had consensual sex with Rodney Reed, which she then denied. Unfortunately, this woman was replying to this Facebook nut.
Oh no.
And he was like, "Well, why don't you come forward and say that you never said it was Reed?" And she was like trying to explain that she always said that because they matched her to the case. So I've seen these people go after these victims that are listed right here, including ones that aren't directly accusing them of anything. Like they also go after the Linda Schluter woman who accused Reed of the assault that she got away from. Because they're like, oh, her story's too fantastical. There's a conspiracy about how she's actually an escort that was working for one of the Texas like it was all set up to get Rodney Reed. Everybody wanted to get Rodney Reed.
So 7 different women,
Yeah.
all on their own or maybe together, decided, hey, this singular black man in Texas, he's got to go. Why does he got to go? I don't know. He's so special and unique in some way that nobody knows. We all have to conspire against him at different times, different years, different places to then collect his semen and have it in and out or around us and to get him in jail for no reason.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound fantastical at all. That sounds very level-headed. I can see why the Innocence Project is so well-funded when they're so grounded in scientific research and just this is the most ridiculous shit. I'm so glad I brought you on. This is infuriating and just educational at the same time.
I mean, look, they have a bunch of different tactics that they'll use that are super effective, like propaganda documentaries you already went over, but they also will, like, if anybody who even remotely smelled your case ended up getting busted years later, you know, a la that prosecutor who texted that girl like inappropriate things, they will bring that up in the Kevin Cooper case. This is the guy who did the Chino Hills massacre. Guilty as hell, by the way. Like, I mean, 4 bodies under his belt.
Who's this?
Like Kevin Cooper.
I'm gonna look that guy up now.
Yeah, he escaped from prison. He was hiding in the house next to him. You could just look up Chino Hills massacre. There's a surviving victim that IDs him as the perpetrator. He actually wrote a letter to the governor when they were trying to get him out again. It's one of the most heartbreaking things I've seen because he was an 8-year-old at the time and he got stabbed in the neck, and they essentially use him having to squeeze to speak to people while he was recovering as like testimony that he ended up like changing his story or something like that, which is crazy. But yeah, Kevin Cooper's DNA is on the case or whatever. All in the crime scene. He's unbelievably guilty.
What's
of course,
the
Kim
story with
Kardashian.
this? I see that there's a hatchet.
There were multiple weapons. So he killed the father first, then he killed the mother, then he went to kill the kids, and then he stole their car and drove away.
Oh yeah, I see the sheriff's department around their beater car, their Woody state grocery getter.
Yeah, this is like an epic. This is called the Chino Hills massacre. It's like a huge case, and he's a death row case, and they try to make him to seem innocent. So like they'll say such stupid things with the Kevin Cooper case. Like one of the ways that they say he's innocent, they're like, "Oh, if Kevin Cooper wanted to steal the car, why would he break into the house and kill everyone? They kept the keys to the car inside the car." Which he wouldn't know until after he entered the home in the first place. Like
To
the
look
car
for
was
the
parked,
keys.
yeah, the car was parked in the driveway. And then they'll do little tricks. They're like, "Oh, well, Kevin Cooper wanted money. Why did he leave money on the table of the kitchen and grab a beer?" Which is what they said he did. And then you go look at the crime scene photos. It's like $1.38 on the table underneath the newspaper. So they make it seem like he left thousands of dollars on the table or whatever. So yeah, there's DNA evidence. They match his prison issued cigarettes to the scene of the crime.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually follow a blood trail from their home to where he was staying after he broke out of prison. His DNA is all over that, with mixed in with their DNA. And this is another guy that they're trying to get off for this crime, and they're trying to frame 3 white guys for it because supposedly, allegedly, this kid said, the surviving kid, that there were 3 white guys that showed up to his property. Now, of course, he's alive and you can ask him, and he's like, yeah, there were 3 guys dressed in white because they were asking him questions and he was squeezing, that asked to paint the property first. Like they were like painters going around. They were Mexican, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Like that same day. It has nothing to do with the crime, nothing to do with the murder, nothing to do with anything. But they used those people as like the suspects to throw it off from Kevin Cooper, ignoring the overwhelming evidence. And by the way, that kid, the surviving kid, like one of the things that he constantly talks about is that he had his best friend sleeping over. So he still feels like he killed his best friend because he was the sole survivor of the massacre.
Oh, he's got survivor's guilt. Yeah.
Yeah.
So wait,
his
so he killed mom, dad, the sister,
mom, dad, sister, and his friend that was sleeping over, and he put a knife in his neck.
Yeah.
Or a screwdriver, something like an ice pick. It was some screwdriver-like object.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, we find out through the history that Kevin Cooper has a history of attacking people and putting blades up to their neck in that exact same way. And the way that they caught Kevin Cooper is that he managed to get himself onto a boat to help out a family. And he decided when they were docked to hop off that boat and just randomly rape another individual there because like you do. And during the course of that rape, coincidentally, shockingly, the way that he threatened that woman, you will be shocked to find out.
Wait. I have a little bit of telekinesis. I might be able to read your mind. Did he hold up a blade or a screwdriver-like item to the woman's neck as he sexually assaulted her? Is that what potentially happened?
That is what happened.
Mother of God!
But one of my favorite things about the Kevin Cooper thing is that there's this ingredient, and by the way, they pulled this in the O.J. Simpson thing, and I didn't know this until I knew this, right? So there's
I mean, that's usually how it works. I don't know things until I know them too.
Well, there's like an ingredient in laundry detergent and all this different stuff. That's actually a similar ingredient or like the same root chemical as the preservative that they put in the vials of blood to make your blood last longer. So if you'll remember, they said like O.J. Simpson's blood tested positive for this preservative, if you remember. So they do this in the Kevin Cooper case. They say, oh, his shirt, the blood on the shirt, because they found a bloody shirt with Kevin Cooper's DNA on it at the scene of the crime, by the way.
Totally planted there by the 3 white men.
Yeah. Prison issue and all that. And he was just coincidentally living over there. And they just happened to go from the murder scene to where he was staying after he broke out of prison and planted all that evidence coincidentally. So they'll say there's this chemical. I forgot the name of it, but it's like the same preservative that blood is in, right? And it's like they tested and they're like, oh, it's there, right? And this is like a huge thing. There's like a New York Times article and in the documentaries, they're like, this chemical is there. But the thing is, this chemical is in laundry detergent. It's in everything. Yeah. So what you would normally do is you would test the bloody part of it, and then you would test the shirt part of it. And if there was more in the shirt part of it than in where the blood stain is, because the blood would actually dilute this chemical, what you would find out is that it's in the detergent.
Yeah, it's just Tide, baby. Just a little bit of Tide in that shirt.
Yeah. So when they did that, they find out that it's more in the shirt than in there because this was like one of the primary agents in the detergent that they used in the prison.
Mm-hmm.
So like this whole blood preservative thing that you often see, it's a very common chemical, and they use that very deceptively in these documentaries,
And
which is why these people again lose in court but try to win in the court of public opinion.
So you're saying that basically their argument would be somebody planted this shirt there, used a vial or some sort of stored blood from this suspect who didn't commit the murder, because obviously this shirt has the preservative in it. This is old blood that was preserved in some sort of blood bank that was then soaked into the shirt and then left there intentionally.
Yes.
The biggest load of shit I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And once again, these are for nobodies. This is for a guy that broke out of prison. We're planning this on a guy that broke out of prison. This isn't JFK's assassination. These are random folks that are unfortunately now deceased. And some dude who's done nothing but fuck up his entire life that has no promise. He's not some sort of Manchurian candidate. Like, what do we...
Yeah.
But of course, like you said, everybody's innocent. We have to downgrade America's bad. Racism.
Everybody's innocent and America's really racist. So.
It's super racist. I don't know if you've known this. We have only gotten worse since the Civil War. And
Sure. But yeah, I would always keep an eye out for that one anytime you hear that this preservative was in there, because again, it's something that like you don't know it until you know it, but it's all about the concentration, because it's literally in everything. Like,
I've never heard of that in any of my time on the stand or being cross-examined by a defense attorney or being just, hey, when there's a prep, like you go over like your statements and some of the physical evidence or the statements that a suspect, defendant, whatever, has made with the assistant district attorney that has the case. I have never in my entire 12 years of law enforcement being around a lot of dead bodies have ever had anybody say, listen, Rich, when you go on the stand, they're going to ask you about Tide. I've never, ever in my entire life. So if they're not doing it during a criminal investigation, this is kind of back up what you're saying. If I've never even heard of it, so not just myself, but my entire career, nobody's even come up to me and warned me or told me or advised me, police or ADA, whatever. Nobody's ever told me about a defense attorney saying, hey, look out, there's Tide in the shirt and it's the same thing as a blood preservative, so they might question you on that. Then why even bring it up except for, like you're saying, propaganda, to sow that seed of doubt.
Yeah, put it in the documentary. And again, this is like a trick they used in the O.J. Simpson case. Also a guy who was guilty as hell. I mean, I hope we can all move past anybody who thinks he was innocent. But yeah, it's more of a movie thing, but like you'll notice it in you probably were never in a case where they accused anybody of planting blood, because this was be like the go-to thing. I'm sure they bring this up in the Avery, somewhere in the Avery case as well. But like you find out it's in everything. I wish I could remember the exact name of this like preservative that they're always looking for.
Well, you know what? I've got a Google machine here. Let me just look it up. Let's see. Blood preservative. Found in laundry detergent. Detection of blood on clothing laundered with sodium precarbonate. Is that what it is? Sodium precarbonate?
Might be. I feel like I know it as like a 3-letter thing.
Laundering clothes with modern detergents containing sodium
CPD.
precarbonate.
I think it's CPD. Oh no, DPJ?
DPJ?
I don't remember.
A whole bunch of letters.
I feel like I know it as something like that. But yeah, it's something common in laundry detergent. Like, I'll have to rewatch the Kevin Cooper documentary when they make this stupid ass point, and then I'll tell you exactly.
On cold water, detergent, sodium precarbonate. It's got tetramethylbenzidine.
Yeah, I think that might be it. But now I'm like
reagent. Positive results using, or maybe that's a testing agent. I'm not sure.
I don't know chemicals. I'm just,
Hey man, I'm just a street cop, dude. Yeah, I'm surprised that I could say tetramethyl. Yeah, see, I just fucked up already.
I didn't even attempt to swing at that one.
I mean, I should have just stopped when I got it right the first time, and now here I am stumbling, fumbling, and bumbling all over my own tongue.
Somebody in your chat was like, "Is it PB&J?" Yes.
Somebody goes AIT. That's a military term. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. Do you want to go over any cases or any other questions?
I'm on your time, bud, because I don't know how much time you've got throughout the night. I was going to call it if you had to get out of here soon, but if you want to go over one more thing, something that you think we should hit on.
I mean, I have a few minutes, but if you have like questions, then I can go over questions. Somebody said OJ murdered me.
Dude, I'm not going to lie. My chat is dark. My chat is it's all dark humor. So there's just if you coast through it long enough, you'll just see a whole bunch of demented jokes. Nothing is off limits.
Can we be honest about OJ? Like, he started his Twitter account on the 15-year anniversary of his wife's like murder.
Yeah,
or
like,
was it?
And his video was creepy as shit too. It was just like, "Hey everybody," and you're like, "Whoa,
Hey
whoa.
Twitter world."
Yeah, I'm gonna say some things on here. OJ, don't do that. OJ, don't make it worse. And everybody, well, I don't say everybody loved him, but that is one of the weirdest moments of celebrity like I've ever seen. Like, he got more famous, almost more revered, but like just nobody wanted
he
to touch
became
him.
hated though. He was beloved.
Well, he was hysterical on like the Naked Gun series.
Yeah.
Like, I was honestly, before OJ started murking people, I loved his movies. I thought he was hysterical characters in his movies.
When you listen to the 911 calls from like Nicole Brown Simpson, this is not funny, but it is interesting how famous he was.
Mm-hmm.
When she would call, she was like, "Hey, my husband's attacking me." She's like, "Oh, what does he look like?" She's like, "He's OJ Simpson." And they're like, "The sportscaster?" "Yeah, that's OJ Simpson." Like, he was so well known that she could just say his name over the 911 dispatch and they would come out.
I'm
But
being
there's like
stabbed
so
by
many.
Tom Cruise. The Tom Cruise? Yes, the Tom Cruise.
Yeah. But there's so many little OJ like isms to like to just show how guilty he was. Like the fact that that glove, like people don't realize it's like it's like a customized glove from Bloomingdale's
Mm-hmm.
that Nicole Brown Simpson had a receipt for. So OJ left one at the scene of the crime, and one was at his house 5 minutes away, and it had his blood because he cut himself stabbing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you all have that wound when you're holding a knife because you slip.
Mm-hmm.
Ron Goldman's blood and Nicole Brown Simpson's blood all on this glove that was like very expensive, but also customized with like extra like fur on the inside for warmth
Mm-hmm.
that you could actually see when OJ's broadcasting for sportscasting on the East Coast. You see him wearing those gloves all the time. Like the fact that the prosecution let him like dick around with that glove, like, you know, which you never do, where he's like twisting his thumb, he's like, it don't fit.
Can't get it on. There's also a theory that he was on like some sort of like anti-gout medication, and then he stopped taking it so that his hands would swell up. It's one of the theories. I have no idea if there's any actual science behind it.
Could be. I mean, the thing is, you're never supposed to give the defendant a key piece of evidence if you're the prosecution.
You can.
Because, like,
so in moments like that, you can. They're very few and far in between, and it's only used to damn the man that much more. So honestly, OJ Simpson being like, I can't get it on. I wish they would have had an evidence tech, quote unquote, somebody be like, okay, Mr. Simpson, I'm going to slide this glove on for you. Please extend your fingers and keep them rigid so that I may do so. Slip. Oh, look. But
Yeah,
no,
I
they
mean,
let
like,
him monkey around with it.
look,
I
you-
should not
yeah.
have said that term. That could have been taken out of context.
I didn't even, I know I did hear it, but I didn't even hear it. No, but that's the thing is like, you can do it under certain circumstances, but you can't let the defendant dick around with it.
Yeah.
Like that also let Johnny Cochran drop the most iconic line of the trial. If the glove don't fit, you must acquit.
Yep.
Like, but it's also like the shoes. Like OJ said that he wasn't wearing the shoes that were in the print, and it turns out there's like a bloody shoe print.
Mm-hmm.
This was a really expensive shoe, size 12, OJ Simpson size.
He's only a size 12? I thought he had bigger feet than that.
I don't think he was that, because you know running backs tend to be shorter than you expect.
Sometimes.
I guess for football players, but
They're
I don't know
stocky.
how tall OJ was. Like I'm sorry, I could be wrong about that, but he was size 12, right? So OJ, this shoe, by the way, there was only 300 or 299 of them sold in the whole country that were size 12.
Mm-hmm.
Really expensive shoe. I forgot what it was called. But anyway, that's the only amount. So OJ had told the police he would never wear that ugly ass shoe. Like he would never wear it, never be caught dead in it. Before the trial, photos came out because this guy's on TV all the time. He's always photographed of him wearing the shoe. So like he somehow beat that. He has his blood at Nicole Brown Simpson's house, Ron Goldman's blood, his blood, and Nicole Brown Simpson's blood in the Bronco. Then back at his house, he has his blood, Nicole Brown Simpson's blood, and Ron Goldman's blood. Like you see this chain of transportation of evidence. This is like the most basic principle of transference. But like the saddest thing about the O.J. Simpson case is that people legitimately voted not guilty because they wanted revenge for Rodney King. And there's a very famous interview.
Oh, with the older black woman?
Yeah, where she says 90% of the jury did that and includes herself in there. And then they're like, that right? And she's like, she don't care.
Right? Which is fucking weird. It's weird. Well, I get wanting to get back at the system. Like, I get it. I can understand that. But at this, like, there's other ways than being like, oh, these two people were murdered. You know what?
Yeah.
It's
Who
just
cares? Weird. Well, it's also like, I mean, look, it's the prosecutor's fault. Like,
yeah, how do you not slam dunk that? How do you not choose who's going to be in it? Well, I don't know. If you've got 90% of the jury pool, I mean, think about it. It's a murder case, right? You get a hung jury if just one jury says, nah, I'm not going to do it. All you need is one person to be like, nah, I don't care. Like
but they did the motion for a change of venue. They didn't really fight that because they wanted the bigger courtroom for the TV cameras. So they moved it from Brentwood, where like, you know, the jury makeup would have been different, to I think the courtroom that was near Compton because it was bigger. Then they thought they won jury selection because they're like, look, we have 11 women or 10 women on the jury, but 8 of them were black women, and you're doing a case like, you know, I hate to play into stereotypes too much, but you're doing a case where a famous black guy is being accused of killing a white woman that he was dating instead of a black woman.
Yes, like, there are some negative racial tension. There's some negative racial tension. We're not naive here. We see it on the internet, right? There are some people who are African American that date outside of their race get a lot of flack from African American women.
And to be fair, like, they thought they were winning the jury by loading it up with women. It's just Johnny Cochran was way more connected to the black community than these people, like on the prosecution side. Not to mention like the N-word cop. Like, let's be honest.
Dude, I was going to say that same thing too. Like, bro, why? You can't.
Well, it's not even the N-word part that's the worst part. The worst part is that this guy had sued the LAPD because he said they made him racist because he was a police officer for the LAPD. So he lost the lawsuit and they kept him on the police department. But he already admitted that he was a racist.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
He sued.
So there was
he sounds like mistakes. A shitbag cop. LAPD made me racist, so now I'm suing you. All right, so you're racist and you can't employed,
but like he just admitted that he was a horrible racist.
Right? You just admitted that you can't geez, what I'm trying to say. No, I don't want to say dispense justice because that's not it. You can't like assist. You can't be impartial when assisting members of the public. Now you've just said that you are ineffective in your position because of your bias. Like,
yeah.
And they kept him. It sounds about right. I mean, L.A. was one of the most corrupt departments ever until they got raided by the FBI. If I'm not mistaken, it was the FBI, and then they had to clean up their act. And New York City was on that way too. Well, I forget what. There's a really good documentary about like the 77, like the Brooklyn 77.
Yeah, there's like a professionalization of the NYPD because they were really like they were very underpaid, and that led them to have to take these side jobs. So they were working in the criminal underworld. So. Like it was technically the professionalization of the police is when they started introducing those like civil service exams, but it's almost like the re-professionalization of the NYPD because they were just so underpaid. It was considered like a grunt like job.
Yeah, that's why the Irish got it. The Irish just needed something, and then they took it over. And
true,
they were like, "Who's going to do this job?" The poor Irishmen that can't get a job anyway because Irish need not apply. Used to be signs in New York City that said that, and a bunch of other places. So they're like, sweet. What's a shitty job that's got a little bit of power that I can take advantage of? There you go.
Somebody in your chat said that he's been to Popeyes or he worked at Popeyes for 3 years and stereotypes are real. Here's the crazy thing I learned about Popeyes. So, Popeyes, the fast food joint, they had a huge falling out with Popeye's corporate and the franchise owners. So in order to make amends, they bring in this new CEO, and she basically was not enforcing any of the standards that you enforce from corporate. And included in that was that they weren't going to require any bare minimum customer service training for the employees that work at Popeyes. And she also wasn't going to ding them for bringing out slow food. So the reason why Popeyes has terrible customer service, and that's their reputation, is because for 7 years they had no requirements that were forced down upon them by the corporate headquarters on who they hired. And then everybody who had experience working at Popeyes came up in that system, so they don't know how to train the next generation of employees in customer service. So, like, yeah, you could say like stereotypes are true because there's a lot of black people that work at Popeyes, but I will remind you that the black people who work at Chick-fil-A are as polite as any of the employees that work at Chick-fil-A because they actually enforce customer service. So Popeyes actually destroyed their own image in that regard. If you guys didn't know, there's like a whole story about that.
Yeah, I see that. The Mark wrote it down. He's the one that put it out there. Mark, are you saying that the workers at Popeyes are what made dark-skinned stereotypes dead on for you, or the individuals that showed up and were purchasing food, or a combination of the both?
Oh, it's I mean, look, the Popeyes workers, at least they fight together. That's kind of dope.
I'm down with that. Yeah, they're like Waffle House. You don't mess with Waffle House workers.
Listen, Waffle House gets a bit of a bad rap. It's the only place that's open at like 3 a.m. in the South, like when everybody gets out of the clubs.
Listen, I don't think it gets a bad rap. I think it's just polite realism. Hey,
I know.
If you go there, this is what you could expect. Don't freak out if it happens.
Listen, if you go to Waffle House at 2 p.m., you're gonna be fine. If you go at 2 a.m., listen, you're playing with your life.
You're playing with fire here. You know what's going on. You know what you're doing. You're gonna deal with some drunks, a couple stoners. There's gonna be a guy outside that's high on crack or meth, wandering around asking for money, potentially breaking into your car. It just is what it is. Mark replied,
have you ever seen
everybody.
The Walmart? Have you ever seen the Walmart like crime index thing where there's more crimes committed in Walmart supercenter parking lots than like the surrounding community that they live in? Like they become hotspots for that. I would love to see a map that like does that, but near a Popeyes or near a Waffle House.
You know what? I bet you it would only show assaults, right? Because the only thing that's really happened near a Popeyes or a Waffle House, not a lot of car break-ins because, what's in the cars? You're breaking into cars at Walmart because people got stuff, right? They're driving around. They're doing their weekly pickups.
It's violent crime and robberies in Walmart because a lot of them don't have cameras. In fact, the only Walmart parking lots that have cameras are the ones where they try to unionize.
Really?
Yeah. Back for a long time, this was how Walmart did business. They wouldn't spend money on cameras because once you're out of the store, who cares about you?
Not your problem. Yeah, not my problem.
But like if you try to unionize, no, we need to surveil that shit.
Oh yeah, turn those cameras on inside, not outside. Put them in the break room. Get a little secret camera. What was that last case you wanted to hit on?
I didn't have like a last case. I mean, I had the OJ, which I talked about for a little bit, but I didn't have an additional one.
Oh man, OJ. Yeah, that was funny. Well then, we'll end it here, man. I've soaked up 2 hours of your time. I loved every minute of it. You've shown me the light when it comes to the Innocence Project and how they're basically a wolf in sheep's clothing. And you have educated me on the O.J. Simpson trial, which I thought I already knew so much about. And now I know so much more. The next time that the Innocence Project shows up on Joe Rogan's, I might have to have you back. Just so we can break down the absolute shenanigans that goes on with that.
I gotta maybe do a video on another case that we didn't touch on here because I'm not super familiar with it, but it was in Jamaica, Queens, and I think he had the guy on after he was exonerated, and his appearance is so funny because he definitely did it. Mm-hmm. He's dead to rights, but his appearance is so funny because Joe Rogan asked him what happened, and he's like, "Listen, Joe, everybody knew I didn't do this case." Like he can't even explain why he's innocent. He just says,
"Oh, just everybody knows."
Everybody knew from the jump. I'm like, no, bro, you're definitely convicted.
Bro, that's not what Joe asked you. I'm like, yeah, I'm just not going to answer the question. He became a politician for it, and just deflected the answer.
Yeah, everybody knew, man.
Everybody knew that.
But yeah, like maybe another time when actually do a breakdown of that. I like to get into the nitty gritty of the cases before I like cover them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I try not to know them just superficially.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, the Innocence Project is horrible, and I would say whenever they're presenting something to you, remember they're presenting one specific side to you, and instead of focusing on what they're putting forward for you, think about what they're not showing you, because these people were convicted, and you usually don't get convicted based on nothing.
Correct. Or, and like you said earlier, I think you said it more than once actually, what they'll do is they'll try to shift blame to somebody that's not there, that can't defend themselves, whether it be the victim or whether it be a co-conspirator, and say, oh, you know what? It was the co-conspirator. He did everything. My guy didn't do anything. He was just there, got wrapped up in it. The other guy, he did everything. Or, oh, hey, it's the victim or the friend of a victim. Somebody that's never been even brought onto the stand or questioned because they're so obviously not involved.
Or a dead person. Like, that's always good, too.
Yeah, how's the dead going to defend themselves? No, it's this dead guy. So we should just let this person out. They'll be totally fine. Justice is finally served. That guy's already dead, and our guy's alive, so let's get him out of here. Sean, where can everybody find you? They should know where to find you, but where do you want them to go in order to find you? And
you can find all my links. You can find all my links on my website, actualjusticewarrior.com. But I was going to say the /join part that I say in every one of my videos. Not there.
That's all right. I'll say the second half. Give me you give me the money.
Yeah. Yeah, you can find me there. Twitter at I am Sean90. YouTube channel is just Actual Justice Warrior. But all the links are available on the website. Really easy to find. And if you wanted to watch me on Rumble or whatever, the links to that there should be there too.
And you're going to be at the Vulcan Center in Austin, Texas?
Yes, on Saturday, April 27th.
April 27th.
For Mind Fest. Like Lauren Chen, Jimmy Dore, a bunch of people in there.
I used to like Jimmy Dore. Or I mean, I used to hate Jimmy Dore, and then he got off of TYT. And then I feel like he kind of calmed down a little bit with a like super anti-cop hate rhetoric, and then started to like be like a little bit more normal, a little bit more centered.
I wish Jimmy Dore would acknowledge that he inspired the Baton Rouge shooter. So.
Oh, I remember. I think I remember you breaking that video down. We were like, you need to fight against the cops, dude. That's when I was very animate anti Jimmy Dore. I was very upset with him, but he's changed enough to where I can laugh at the things that he says now. I don't know if he ever apologized for saying that. I don't care. People make mistakes and say stupid shit, but
listen, I'm not one of these people that says you have to apologize for everything. In fact, I literally just made a video explaining how like I don't agree that Anna Kasparian needs to apologize for everything, right?
Correct.
But like apologizing for something would be good. And like that's kind of a big one, like in my opinion. But
I'm just happy to see that he's grown to where that's not his perspective anymore. And that he's able to kind of see. Oh, you're wincing. Is that still his perspective?
Do we know that's not his perspective, or does he just not talk about the police anymore?
I've seen him talk about criminal activity and not disparage the police, where previously he blamed the police for a lot of what was happening, for crime, for the uneven disbursement of justice, basically, picking on black people or minorities.
Listen, I'm gonna ask him. So I'm gonna see him in person. So we'll find out.
Oh, I would do that. I would love to see. Are they live streaming it?
Yeah, they are live streaming it.
Oh yeah.
But I was gonna ask him in person, but are you saying that I should ask him in the Q&A period?
I mean, I'm just saying.
I'm just kidding. I'm not doing that.
It would be, Jimmy, since you used to hate police so much, said some horrible things about them on TYT when you were there, unhinged things. You seem to have calmed down. Has your viewpoint on policing and perhaps crime changed over the course of a decade? And if so, how?
That's a very nice way to phrase the question. I might ask him, but who knows? Anyway, but yeah, Vulcan Gas Company, April 27th, Saturday, Minds Fest. I forgot what the website is, honestly, so who cares about that?
I'll throw it in the description. Well, I'll put your link in the description. Is there a link on your...
It's not on the website, but it's in the top of any of my recent videos descriptions.
I'll put both in there.
But it's like one of those like Eventbrite. I don't know what it is. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And I'm sorry it was difficult to get a hold of. It took me like a while to respond.
Oh, I'm okay, man. I'm just glad you didn't ditch me. I was so happy that we could get this thing together. And like I said, I really have enjoyed the past 2 hours we're going on now.
No, look, I'm happy to do like live streams and whatnot. Like, it's just if you ask me to do something a month from now, I have no idea what I'm doing a month from now.
Oh, I'm the
It's like when
same.
people say, "What videos do you have?" It's like, well, I'm shooting and then I put them out when I have them. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm not saving it. There's no saved videos that are coming out.
It's
Not
all
really.
current events. I'm very similar too.
Oh no, I'll even do old cases, but like if I shoot it, I'm not keeping it for like 2 weeks in a vault. You
Yeah.
know, like it's coming out when it's coming out.
Yeah, I've got like ADD. I can't let it sit for like more than 3 or 4 days. If I plan something out where I'm like, oh, this is gonna go next week, I'm like itching, like there's bugs crawling on my skin to put it out as soon as I can.
There's a notorious thing about my channel where it's like, oh, I'm like, if you guys like this video enough, I'll make a part 2, and that's like almost a guarantee that I'm never gonna make that part 2. And if I am gonna make it, it's also like I've already made it.
Yeah.
Like
You've already
like
made, you've already decided to make it because you're already in that writing sphere of like, oh, I've got the information. I'm already looking it
no,
up.
it's
I'm,
already shot and edited, and like it's just I
you
split the
just want
video
likes.
because the shooting was too long, and then I just shot that part to break it up. Like,
Yeah.
so like there is no like there is no amount of likes that will make a part 2, and everybody knows that who's still waiting for a part 2 for God knows whatever video. But yeah. Like, that's the strategy. You got to keep them guessing. Never promise anything. I never had a schedule ever in YouTube, ever.
Under promise, over deliver.
Yeah.
Or I don't. Wait, I think it's the opposite. Under promise, over promise, and under
Under
deliver.
promise, and then you over deliver.
Yeah.
All right, man. I gotta catch you later. It's after 11. I gotta get to sleep / maybe watch something with the fiance before I go to sleep. I gotta find out.
There you go. Well, I'm going to close the stream out. We've got the links in the bottom, in the description. Check out Actual Justice Warrior.